We are working on the 1985 Ford F-250 with the 460 in it. So I've delayed this project for a long time, so I didn't really want to get into it. But we are going to take all of the emission stuff off of this thing. So 1980 was the kind of the first year of all the emissions crap. So we are going to delete it, and we're going to put a new carburetor on. Because apparently these carburetors were tuned for the 2-degree retard and all this emissions junk. So we are going to replace that with a 600 Edelbrock that I had laying around from the original 289 that came out of my wife's Mustang. And that's fairly new. So I'm not positive whether we're going to see how it works, but I'm going to maybe delete the cruise control. I'll take it all off and I'll place it aside. Because I never use it. It actually does work, but I'm wondering if the linkage is going to be easy to deal with or hard to deal with. So here we go on this journey to eliminate the pollution junk so I can easily work on this vehicle. Your thermostat housing has two heat activated vacuum ports, I guess, or T's. So the top one comes out and there is no radiator antifreeze coming out. The bottom one, there is antifreeze coming out. So you can quickly pull the T out of there and then quickly put the plug back in with a little bit of pipe sealant in a tube, like so. So it's a Dorman 3/8 by 18 pipe plug, national pipe thread, and then you need a 3/8 Torx bit, and that's what comes out. You got a little heat shield, and that comes out. CV valve, I don't know what the hell that thing is. So I'm just going to run a rubber line. It's got to be fairly stiff so it doesn't collapse. And then that goes into the front big port on the carburetor. So I'm replacing the carburetor. I'm getting rid of, I think I'm getting rid of the line. I might put it back on. Taking the carburetor off. So the cruise control and the throttle cable just pops right off of the carburetor. It's just on a ball. So then we have the little heat riser thing that helps to heat up the choke. We've got one tubing nut back there, and then we got one line coming off there, rubber line that goes right there. So I think the cruise control possibly is going to stay. Okay, so we're pulling this thing off. I have no clue what that does. So the lines went over to, I've replaced the carburetor already, over to your Holley vacuum secondary canister, and then down to the T right there. And so anyway, and there was a little wiring harness that went to it that I just zip tied back. So this could possibly be something to do with the heater, and if that is the case, I'm going to have to hook this back up. Okay, I've taken off all the stuff that I want to take off at this point. So I kept the EGR. I just I kept the plate underneath the carburetor down there. I installed the Edelbrock carburetor. It's a 600 off of the 289 that came out of my wife's Mustang. The EGR, I kept it hooked up. I made sure I sucked on it to make sure that the little valve goes in and out. I made a T off of the line that comes off of the ported vacuum line. Sorry. So I made a tee off of that goes into the air cleaner. I left all of the air cleaner crap on there. That's hooked up. And then the stovepipe is coming up. And we're going to keep that. We're going to keep the fresh air intake. I checked the PCV valve back there. I just plugged off all that stuff behind there that goes from head to head or exhaust manifold or whatever. Your vacuum modulator for your automatic transmission, that line comes up in the back there. I plugged off the T down there. I got rid of the two T's coming off of your thermostat housing. I had to weld the tab for the kickdown linkage onto the Edelbrock linkage. And I had to drill a hole. I don't know if you can see that. About a ½ inch farther forward for the throttle linkage. I probably could have just bent the tab on the back there, but I just drilled a hole and then put the little nubby deal that the throttle linkage snaps onto back on there. The alternator bracket, so the air pump is off of there. The alternator bracket, I'm going to find one in the wrecking yard. Apparently early 70s and 60s pickup trucks, you can take the 460 alternator bracket off that, and that will eliminate all this junk, all this extra bracketry on the top. I might try to alter the bracket and see how that works. There might be too much twisting on it, but anyway, that thing, the hot fuel system, whatever the hell that thing, it sends fuel back to the tank. It's a return line, and I've read that you can eliminate this. It's a source of numerous problems for people because it gets plugged up or whatever and it's not operating, and then you go out and buy a new one and there's different sizes of them. You get the smaller size and the thing doesn't run very good. So somebody has already jimmy rigged this thing together with the hose clamps and the line that doesn't necessarily fit. So I'm just tightening that up. I'm going to fire this up with a new carburetor and see if the heater works and see if everything is okay. And then I'm going to move on to this. If all else fails, I'm not sure what the fuel pump pressure is from the stock fuel pumps, but it might overwhelm the carburetor. Then I don't know what an Edelbrock has, but the needle and seat type situation. So I might put a regulator on there. But anyway, so all the junk is off. We're ready to rip here. And with the air cleaner assembly, I just wanted to keep that stuff on there because apparently it makes cold starting a lot easier if you just keep the stock stuff on there. All right, we're done with the emissions crap removal. So I kept all the stovepipe and this stuff because I've read that it doesn't. It makes it for hard starting in the cold. So I've ran this thing for, I don't know, 100 miles or so, and it runs great. But so here's the one issue I had when I first put it back together. The nut on the throttle linkage, so I moved, you see the hole right there? That is the original hole. So I had to drill another hole right in front of it at the same height, because the factory linkage, or cable, or whatever you want to call it, needed to be farther forward. So, or was farther forward. So I bolted this thing on there, and the carburetor would not idle down. I could not get it to idle at the proper RPM. So I went through everything. I went through the choke linkage. I tried to figure out what the hell was going on here. And it ended up being that stud that was sticking through there for the ball that the cable goes onto, was protruding through the nut and making contact with the spring on the idle screw. So it was causing this linkage to be farther back than it should have been, causing it to idle high. So I ground the stud down so it doesn't make contact anymore, and now it runs great. So the heater operates, the air conditioning operates, everything runs good. It seems to be a little more responsive, a little better running than before. And I just left all the stuff in the back that goes between the manifolds and the head. I just capped it off, and yeah, so runs great. Engine compartment is cleaner, and I'm happy. That thing, I'm going to try getting rid of it at some point. It's a hot start thing, so it recirculates fuel, so this goes back to the tank. But there's many problems people have with it not giving enough fuel to the carburetor. And then you can buy different sizes of these things, and that limits the amount of fuel that's going to the carburetor. But you'll probably have to put a fuel regulator on here to limit it to whatever, 7 or 8 pounds of fuel pressure, so it doesn't overwhelm the needle and seat. I don't know if you call it the needle and seat in an Edelbrock carburetor, but anyway, yeah, it seems to run a little better, and it seems to run a little cooler for some reason. But anyway, yeah, it's a good project, and it just cleans up the engine compartment a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to work on, and yeah, thanks for watching.